Welcome back to the Eduverse Enigma Podcast. This week, we're chatting with XpertVR's very own Marvin Del Mundo, the head of marketing here at XpertVR. This episode, we'll be grading our top 6 collaborative VR platforms, including Engage, Spatial, Rec Room, Remio, Horizon Workrooms, and VRchat. You won't want to miss it.
All right, welcome back to the Eduverse Enigma Podcast. Exciting episode today. We have Marvin Del Mundo from our team jumping on, and we're going to be chatting about immersive collaborative platforms for education. So we have a list of 6 different platforms that we're going to go through, just discussing the pros, cons, what we like about them, different features that they offer, and how they could work in an education space and how educators that we know are using them. Marvin, thanks for hopping on to go over these different platforms.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Evan. Good to be back on the Eduverse Enigma Podcast.
For sure. All right, so I know we put together a list and kind of split them up 3 and 3, and we're going to kind of go through, I guess, talk about the features of each one, and then kind of collaboratively grade some of the top criteria that we set for them. So the criteria that we set for grading, there are 7 different categories that we set. So number 1 is integration with other software and hardware. Number 2, ease of use, i.e. the controls, is there any lag, how easy is it to join, their customer support, etc. Number 3, the engagement and interactivity, as well as variety of content on the platform. Number 4, the number of people that can join the platform. Number 5, how accessible the platform is. Number 6, the customizability and building tools within the platform. Number 7, the community outside of the platform, beyond just the customer support side of things, but the community of users using the platform. And then lastly, number 8, our educational score and how this could be used in education. So taking those grading criteria into consideration, I know, Marvin, you went into 3 platforms that you like that we've used at XpertVR. So I'll let you start off with one of the platforms, and we'll kind of just do a quick breakdown of your thoughts on the platform. And then we can kind of go back and forth if I have any other thoughts, and then we'll go through the grading criteria and I'll agree or disagree, and then vice versa. We'll switch it up and I'll go through a platform and we'll go back and forth like that. So what's the first platform that you were researching, Marvin?
Yeah, for sure. The first platform that I was researching is one that we actually use at XpertVR and we're using currently right now. It's called Remio VR, and it's one that we use every Monday morning for our team meetings. And personally, I love using Remio VR. Just jumping into the headset really gives that extra feel and like that physical presence that we don't have currently because we all work remote. And yeah, there's a lot of features on Remio VR that I enjoy, whether it's just the little interactive features and just the overall just like the feel and theme of the actual like workspace in Remio is something that I really do enjoy.
Yeah, I completely agree. It's a great platform, and I think ever since we started using it, probably over a year ago now, we've been using it every Monday, and we've only switched up just so that we can research a couple other platforms, but it's our go-to. And yeah, I agree. It has so many great features. I guess let's go through the grading criteria. I'll start you off and go through each one, and you can give your grade, and then I'll let you know, I guess, if I agree or disagree. So we're grading on a score out of 10 expert stars, and we can be exact here if you want to give something a 9.2 or a 3.6. So whatever you think the grade should be. Starting off at the first one here, we have integrations with other software and hardware.
Ooh, that's a good one. I think, honestly, Remio VR does a good job at integrating a bunch of different softwares. I know just recently they added Shapes XR, which is another big popular VR app. Haven't really jumped into there myself to test that out, but along with that, they have other fun little games like GeoGuessr that I know one of our team members, Chris, absolutely loves. And yeah, they just have a bunch of different games that I do enjoy there myself. I guess that's on the software side of things, but on the hardware side of things, I think Remio VR, you can jump into VR headsets available for the Quest 2, and I believe it's on other headsets, right, Evan?
Yeah, yeah, I'm looking here. It works with the Quest 2, Quest Pro, Pico Neo 3, Pico Neo 4, HTC Vive Focus, Windows desktop, as well as desktop browser. So,
Right. So yeah, I think on the hardware side of things, there are a lot of like great integrations. I think the only thing it's really missing is a mobile app, but I think that's going to be coming in the near future once it becomes bigger and more accessible for more people.
yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think they're really covering all the different types of software, and really one of the only apps out there that is integrating with other software, where they have this room of portals where you can integrate a lot of applications that you have built into your own Quest or whatever headset that you have. And then you can just walk through what the portal and go to Shapes XR or Golf Plus or Body Swaps and all these other applications that are out there. And it really, covers all the hardware out there as well, other than, like you said, a mobile app and maybe a Mac operating system as well. But really, it's touching on all the solutions that you need. So I guess with that in mind, what would you grade it at for this first grading of Remio?
Yeah, I guess to set the bar, I would rate Remio pretty high, probably a 9.1. Just because with all the integrations that you stated, I think that Remio does provide that extra element that a lot of VR apps don't have. And I just think that compared to all the other VR apps, like it is very, very unique. So 9.1, I would say. I think the only thing that's really lacking from it is that mobile app. But again, that's something that's in the works. And Remio is very, very new. I think when we first started using Remio, it was still in the beta testing phase. So from that point in time to now, like it's come a really, really long way. So a few years down the line, I have no doubt in my mind that the mobile app will come very soon.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with that 9.1 rating. Like you said, they have so many integrations, and even if you're looking right now, they are kind of past that beta stage, but they're also showing kind of what's coming with some of their blog posts and things on social media. And then even when you go into the application right now, they have their Remio avatars. They recently added their meta avatars, and then they have a button for Ready Player Me avatars. When you click on it, it says that feature isn't available yet, but it just shows that they're building more integration. So yeah, I think a strong 9.1 is a good bar to set in this competition of different VR collaborative applications.
For sure.
So moving on to the next grading criteria here, ease of use. So again, talking about kind of the controls, how easy it is to use them, the lag that you might experience, joining, customer support that they offer. Where would you rate Remio on that area?
In terms of ease of use, just strictly going based off the actual functionality of being inside a VR headset, I think it's pretty easy. The controls are very basic. Their teleportation is very seamless, I would say. There's not much of a real lag. There are times where I would say, like when we're having our meetings, periodical lags would occur, but nothing that would like go past like a few seconds. I would say the biggest thing would probably just be first joining the servers can be a little bit difficult, just because there have been times where when we would meet with our team, there'd be different instances that would be created. So one person would be in one instance, then a few of our team members would be in another. And using my Mac sometimes when I jump on the web-based browser, and sometimes I have trouble like signing in there and like the browser itself crashes. So I would say, all things considered, a good 7.6, 7.7. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a really fair rating for them, a 7.7, kind of a middle ground in the upper tier there, a nice middle ground or average rating. Like I think they're trying to do a lot, and like they're still a newer company. So they're pushing lots of updates. They're doing updates kind of weekly right now, if not more than that. And with updates, you're going to get a lot of good features, but there's also going to be some things that crash. So yeah, it is an issue sometimes when people are kicked out of the space. But like we said, it's a it's a platform that we're using regularly for our business meetings. We still do trust it enough to be reliable a good amount of the time. But yeah, it is kind of an issue sometimes. But like you mentioned, their customer support is kind of some of the best that we've seen in the market, being able to talk to their CEO and just the amazing team that they have there, as well as just kind of taking all of our feedback of features. And because they're doing those regular updates, we kind of see those features come quickly. And a great example of that, maybe not a very professional example, but we like to play different games within Remio, like you were mentioning, with our tower defense. And we suggested having a Kraken in there. And they were actually already working on it, but they made sure to speed that up and get the Kraken added in so that we could fight a Kraken on top of all the dragons and trolls and everything that we were fighting. So just shows that they're really listening to their community and giving the customer support that we deserve.
Definitely agree.
Yeah. So I think that leads right into the next grading criteria, the engagement, interactivity, and variety of content available within the platform. Where would you grade that category?
Honestly, very close to a 10. I would say probably a 9.6. There's a lot of like interactive features within the actual like app itself that I love and all of our team members generally love. For example, the markers, just having that extra element of just being able to write and draw random things in the air is just super fun and makes the team meetings that much more engaging and exciting. I know one of our team members, Aldrich Joya, he loves to draw his Among Us characters. So that's something I look forward to every Monday meeting. But outside of just that, I would say that they do have a lot of fun and interactive games that are good for team building. And it's just fun, not just having to focus on work all the time.
Yeah, again, couldn't agree more. I think that the 9.6 is a really fair rating. Obviously, we'll be talking about the customizability and building tools as a different category. So I might have changed the score if that was included here. But just the amount of content that they're putting out for different games, from the GeoGuessr to the tower defense, things along those lines. There's so many great pieces of content that they have created, and yeah, so much interactivity with the pens and everything. So yeah, I would agree with that 9.6 rating.
Yeah, just in the room itself, it's not just your regular boardroom. It's a huge room with a basketball court, aero target practice, whiteboards, and all those fun things. So
yeah, that's a good point. There's so much more just in the initial world, even beyond just all the other content that they offer, but just having that environment that's much more than the boardroom that you can go around and have some fun as everyone's joining on the lobby. Yeah, completely agree. Talking about people joining, the next grading criteria is number of people. So how would you rate this grading criteria?
yeah, so I don't think we've ever hit the limit for the number of people for Remio. And upon some of my research on their website, it said there actually is no limit. And sometimes they've hosted events and rooms with over 800 people. So just on this criteria alone, I would give this a 10, because I know a lot of these VR apps, they do have that max limit. Sometimes it's 16, sometimes it's 6, depending on the room. So yeah, not having that limit gives it a 10 for me.
Yeah, completely agree. Yeah, I will say that obviously some of the games that you have to play, they're going to limit the number of people in an instance of that game, or it will get a little laggy if you have too many people. But in the regular rooms, like yeah, having up to 800 people in one of the sessions that they've done, and not having that limit is amazing. So I agree, a solid 10 for that one. And then moving along, accessibility. What would you say here on scoring this category?
Yeah, for accessibility, I would probably give it a 8.4, 8.5. Just because, like I said, like it's available on the VR headset as well as the browser and web app. Fortunately, the only thing that like it's not available on is the mobile, but like we talked about, we're sure that will be coming in the near future. And in terms of the settings and changing controls, I think it's fairly easy to mute yourself, unmute yourself, and just interact with the different emojis and reactions that they have in the actual like settings portion as well too. So yeah, in terms of accessibility, I think 8.5.
Yeah, I agree. 8.5 is a strong rating, just in general, and I think Remio does a great job. Like you said, having all the different hardware available, having that settings menu that you can change all kinds of different accessibility features, being able to mute yourself and have that kind of control, as well as the speaker in the room, being able to have host controls so that you can make sure that you're making the environment as accessible as possible for the people joining. And then I think one of the top things that you mentioned in the ease of use section as well is just that every control, when you jump in, you can turn this on and off, but every control is shown around the controller of what that button or what that joystick does. So it just allows somebody that's so new to VR just to jump in and they can look down at their hands and understand where the buttons are on the controllers and what those buttons do. So yeah, I think 8.5 is a good strong rating as well. Going to the next category, we have the customizability and building tools. So, how would you rate that?
Yeah, I feel that in terms of customizability, like we haven't really been able to freely customize the space itself. So I would say probably a 3 or a 4, just to be exact, 3.7. Just because, yeah, like we haven't really had too much fun with customizing the space itself. To be fair, there is mention on the website that during celebratory holidays like Valentine's Day and Christmas, there are a little bit of decorations that are sprinkled in there, but nothing we can really do ourselves outside of just like uploading our own documents on the whiteboard and everything. I don't think that there's really too much customizability there, but who knows? Remio, like it may just not be meant for that.
Yeah, I agree. It's definitely a lower score at the 3.7, but yeah, you're right. Like Remio is kind of at the moment meant to be more for meetings, and you don't necessarily want a bunch of people jumping into a meeting room and customizing everything and changing everything. They're there for a meeting, so just being able to upload your own documents, I think, covers the functionality that's needed for a platform like Remio. And being able to upload like basic 3D models so that you can see them in the room, just like on a floating pedestal, allows you some of that customizability if you want to like analyze one 3D model or a couple 3D models that your team is working on or something. But for the most part, yeah, it's not necessarily built for that. So I think that makes sense at a nice 3.7 score.
Right.
So moving along to our second last criteria here, community. How would you rate the community?
Yeah, I haven't really actually visited any of the public servers. Anytime I've jumped into Remio, it was always just for our private servers, defenders of the metaverse. But I'm not really too sure. I don't know if I can give a fair rating to the community itself, just because it's not something that I haven't really experienced myself. But I'll give it a 10 just because the community that I've experienced is the XpertVR team, and I love that community.
Yeah, no, I think definitely the community within XpertVR I would rate as a 10 as well. I would probably rate the actual rating of the community as a whole of Remio probably around like the 2 or 3 range, let's say a 2.5. And that's not to bash Remio at all. That's just, I think, at the moment how Remio is built. I know they're starting to add things like I think it's called Remio Town, where you can join in and play with other people, but it is kind of just a bunch of kids on there because it's a free application and they're just kind of playing around. So it's not necessarily meant for the community aspect of things like other platforms that are out there. So yeah, I think a 10 for our XpertVR community, but a 2.5 for the actual Remio community, but similarly to the customizability and building tools, maybe just not something that Remio is necessarily built for, at least at the moment.
For sure.
And then lastly, like thinking about all of these things together, thinking about educators, professors, students using this in an educational space and trying to use this for their classes, what would you kind of rate the overall educational score?
Yeah, I would say the overall educational score, I would give it probably a 7.98, actually 8.1. Just because I feel like there are a lot of like really cool integrations that Remio does offer that I think will be really fun for educators to sort of integrate like educational apps with Remio VR with their classes.
Yeah, I would agree that 8.1 is a really strong rating. Obviously, Remio doesn't necessarily offer the educational content that you're going to need to learn. It's more of a meeting space, but having that interoperability to go into other applications like body swaps or some of our applications as we add them and things along those lines allows you to have that lecture, to have that meeting, to learn the basics and learn the information that you need to then go into a simulation and actually practice what you just learned. So having that interoperability opens up a lot of possibilities for students and professors in these educational settings.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, so that was great going through Remio's score there. We got a good solid score, I think, across the board, other than the areas where Remio's maybe not meant for. We're noticing that it's taken a little bit long. We took a little bit longer than we might have hoped to go through Remio there explaining it. So moving forward, we're going to kind of just go through each platform here and do a quick synopsis. Then Marvin and I will then flash our score with our hands and say it. And if we're way off, we'll kind of debate what we think our score should be there. And if we're close, we'll do a quick one-sentence explanation of why we think our score is there. And that way you can fly through this a little bit faster so that you're not listening to a 20-minute explanation of each platform and can kind of dive deep into each platform on your own, but knowing kind of the basic criteria. All right, so now we're going to go through Spatial. I will say Spatial and one other platform we'll go through. Marvin's not as familiar with as I am, so I'll kind of just give my score. And if Marvin has any thoughts or any reason to disagree, then he'll jump in and say those. But we'll start off with Spatial here and kind of run through Spatial. So to give a quick background, Spatial is a platform that started out as kind of a meeting platform and just like a basic creation, world creation platform. But then over the past couple of years, as NFTs and the blockchain came out, they fully integrated with that, as well as places like Ready Player Me, and now have turned into more of a creator-led space for blockchain metaverse content. So to get into that, let's go through each of the categories here. Number one, the integrations with other software and hardware. So like I said, they're integrated with Ready Player Me. They also integrate with a couple other applications for creation tools, and they do work on multiple types of hardware, whether that's your computer, different types of web browsers. I believe you can join through your phone through the web browser, and then obviously different VR headsets as well. So I would score them pretty high here. I think they don't have the integrations that Remio does with all the different software that's out there. So more of like an 8.5. So I'll give them an 8.5 score on that one. So moving along, ease of use. Spatial, I would rate pretty high at like an 8. And that is because you are able to pretty easily jump in, especially if you're on your computer. If you're just joining from camera, you can basically click on a link just like you would Zoom, join the platform, and enjoy everything that they have to offer. If you want to have an avatar that you're moving around with your computer, still pretty easy to join. And then same with VR, pretty easy to join because they don't have all of your buttons being used. I wouldn't score them at the highest area just because they are a little bit larger of a company now. So getting customer support isn't necessarily as easy as it might have used to be. But I believe that they still do offer different live classes where they have somebody from Spatial kind of walking you through how to use the different controls and how the platform works. So I think an 8 is a nice strong place for them to be at. Then thirdly, we have the engagement, interactivity, and variety of content. I would say here, Spatial is adding more and more content. I haven't played with all the latest content that they've put out, but I would say it's more of kind of a meeting space and like museum type space, if that makes sense, where you're able to go in and enjoy fine pieces of art or NFTs that people have put up in these museum spaces. And it's kind of an area that you're able to walk around, talk with people. They are adding a few games, but I wouldn't say they're at the top tier of games that are out there. So at the engagement, interactivity, variety of content, I would put it more at like a 6.9, just under a 7 there, where it's still a good high score, but not necessarily built for having a lot of variety of content within the platform. Moving along to the number of people category, Spatial allows for a maximum of 50 people within a space. That being said, you can have multiple instances of a space. So I would rate this at kind of like a strong 7.3. Having 50 people in a space is really good. Being able to have multiple instances of the space is great. They don't offer the ability to have a host or one speaker replicated across hundreds of instances of a space. So it doesn't allow you to like host a live event where you have hundreds of people attending, but being able to have up to 50 people is still a pretty strong area. So I think that 7.3 is a fair score there. Moving along to accessibility, they have basic settings and controls built in for accessibility, but not necessarily a lot of accessibility settings. Like I said, it is pretty easy to join from your computer, whether you want to use an avatar on your computer or just your camera. So I think, again, here, it's kind of a strong, let's just put it right at 7, where it's good for all your basic joining needs and being able to use the accessibility features you might have built into your laptop if you're joining that way, but it doesn't have the accessibility features that you might look for to make it a fully accessible VR experience. Then we have customizability and building tools. Here, I'd rate the customizability at a strong 6. And that's just because you are able to build new worlds and add in all kinds of different art and 3D models, but you can't really add in too much or the server gets overloaded. And it's not necessarily built for building fully interactive, large custom worlds. It's kind of, like I said, those museum or meeting type worlds where you're just adding in some art and things to view that you're able to walk around and look at. Community-wise, I would say they have a really strong community. I would rate this at like in 8.5, let's say. And that's because they've kind of built with the NFT and blockchain community. So there's a lot of people that are very passionate in that space and love to share their art and the art that they own. So there's a lot of people on there that are helping each other and growing kind of what can be done on Spatial. Like I mentioned earlier, they do have the ability to join classes where you can learn about Spatial and learn all of the controls from some of their team members as well as other community members. So pretty strong there. Lastly, educational score. This one's kind of a tough one. I would say for the educational score of Spatial, I'd rate it more of around I would say maybe right under Remio at like a 7.8. And this is because it allows you to join. You can build spaces where everyone's learning together and in kind of an educational space, but you can't go into other content. So it really has to be custom built worlds for different like museum artifacts and things along those lines, or just if you want to meet in person. I do score it a little bit higher though, than I might have just off of those criterias, because the avatars within Spatial can look pretty realistic because they're using a selfie of yourself to make the avatar, or you're using a Ready Player Me avatar, which are pretty realistic. So you kind of have that level of realism that you might want in an educational space. So I think that that strong 7.8, 7.9, let's say 7.8, is a good place for them to be, where it's not necessarily meant for education, but there are a lot of educational use cases within Spatial. Now I'll pass it back to you, Marvin, to do another one of these quick run-throughs so that we're not going on tangents about things for Rec Room.
Yeah, for those of you who don't know, Rec Room is probably one of the bigger VR applications on this list. And it's just this massive VR multiplayer online game where you can play a bunch of games with your friends, but you can also have private servers like we do to just meet with teams and friends. Prior to Remio VR, we actually use Rec Room for our Monday morning meetings. So this is another VR application that hits close to home for the XpertVR team. So it's going down this list of grading criteria for integrations with other software and hardware. I'd probably give Rec Room 7.2, just because it doesn't really integrate or have many integrations with softwares, but on the hardware side of things, it is available on PC, mobile, VR, and I believe some Xbox and PS4, PS5. So that's really cool. Then moving on to ease of use, I would say that for Rec Room, I'd probably give it a 8.5, just because all the controls are very straightforward. Not much of a lag, even though that there are a bunch of people on the servers, and this is a widely used VR app. And yeah, in terms of just joining Rec Room, I think it's very simple. You just like log in through your email, and whether you're on the mobile app, VR headset, it's just that quick logging, and then it really isn't too difficult to really join. In terms of engagement, interactivity, and variety of content, I would probably give this close to a 9.2, just because there are a variety of games that are on actual Rec Room. And what I love most about Rec Room is that most of the games on the app itself are created by people playing the games themselves. So there's definitely a lot of content to be played there and to be explored. In terms of number of people, I would probably rate this a little bit lower, just because from prior research, the maximum number of people for each room was just 16 players max. So I'll probably give this a 5.1 rating, just because that's what most VR applications offer from that 8 to 16 max capacity. So yeah. For accessibility, I'd probably give it a 7.1, just because it's on par with most VR applications, but I wouldn't say that they really have any extra features that accommodate to people with different types of disabilities. And customizability and building tools, I think Rec Room rates really, really high here. I would probably give it a 9.9, very, very close to a 10. Close to perfect, but not really. I would say out of all the VR apps that we have on this list, Rec Room is probably the most customizable. For our boardrooms and everything, I know Evan created that entirely from scratch, and we had a version 2 that we didn't really fully get to, but we as a team, on one of the Monday morning meetings that we had, one of our tasks was to sort of just come together and just create that boardroom from scratch and just make it a home for XpertVR. So yeah, I would say customizability, probably a 9.9. In terms of community, 5-year-old me would rate it a 10 for sure.
I would jump in here and add to that comment. I would agree that for myself jumping on, it's maybe a 2.5 kind of rating. But obviously, if you are a kid jumping in, which Rec Room's kind of built for, I think it's a really strong community of lots of like kids running around having fun being kids. So it's I would say it's kind of that is the community, and I would rate it a lot higher if I was part of that community.
Hey, yeah, completely fair.
How about the educational score?
For my educational score, I'd probably give it a 5 or 6, just because there aren't really too many integrations a lot of like classrooms can sort of use. And from my perspective, I do very much see Rec Room as just a gaming platform for kids. And I know we do meet in private servers, and there's boardrooms that we can sort of like come together for those discussions. I don't really see it being used in a classroom unless it's for probably educating the younger kids.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Like, I think it deserves kind of a lower score for its overall educational use cases. That being said, just like you said, I think there's a large opportunity there for classrooms with younger kids and like kind of the K-12 or K-6 type range, where you can get kids into VR and let them kind of explore and create their own things, because the creator tools are pretty intuitive there. It gives that opportunity to say, hey, we're learning about the Roman aqueducts. Like, let's go in and recreate what those aqueducts would look like. And you can kind of give kids that freedom, just like we've seen different applications in school for like Minecraft and things along those lines, where kids are able to create their own world instead of doing an essay or something along those lines. So there's a range of educational opportunities. It kind of just depends how you're using it. So
Yeah. So what would you give it a educational score?
I think with that in mind, like it's there, we rated Remio at an 8.1 and Spatial at a 7.8. I would say that I would put it right in between there, I guess, at a 7.9, where Rec Room it's hitting on that like K to 12 area and how it can be used, but it's not necessarily having integrations that Remio has where you can go into higher level educational applications.
Right. Yeah. Fully agree. 7.9 it is.
Perfect. All right, then moving along, I'll do like I said, we got two here, including Spatial, that I know, Marvin, you aren't as up to speed on. So I'll talk about Engage next and just kind of run through it, because I know that's the other one that you're not as up to speed on. So Engage VR is a platform built specifically for education and business use cases, where you're able to join virtual worlds and build your kind of own lesson plans ahead of time in these virtual worlds. So let's go through the list here, starting off in number 1, the integrations with other software and hardware. They don't necessarily integrate with any other big softwares out there, but on the hardware side of things, just like the other platforms we've talked about so far, they are available across different types of headsets, from the HTC Vive Focus to the Quest 2, and likely the new Quest 3 coming out, as well as being available on computers. So I would rate that as a strong, let's say I would say maybe like a 7 there for Engage, where it's a strong score. They do kind of all the average things that most platforms do, and yeah, do it well. Then moving along, we have the ease of use, controls, lag, joining, customer support. This, I would say, it's pretty easy to get into Engage. It might be a little bit more difficult to define your room and define your environment the first time you're getting in and getting everything set up, unless you've like reset up all the headsets and all the accounts for Engage within those headsets. So I wouldn't say it's like the easiest platform to jump on and get connected on. And because this is built specifically for educational institutions and business institutions, it is a paid app. The other ones that we've talked about do have paid options, but Engage is basically a fully paid app, other than their like free trial accounts. And this just means that there is a little bit more friction. It makes sense why it's a paid app and why there is that friction, but it does cause a little bit more friction. That said, the controls are pretty easy to use. Going in, I haven't really experienced too much lag unless I'm going into a world that has tons and tons of 3D models. And their customer support is really well done, just because they are supporting that educational and business space. So all that said, it's kind of another middle ground, I would say, kind of in that 8 range, like Spatial. Then we have the engagement, interactivity, and variety of content. Here, I would say it's the variety of content is very high, so that would bring the score up a bunch, where you're able to create all kinds of content. We'll get to that more in the building tools, but there's so much content already created for other people, as well as just from Engage themselves. And there's lots of ways to connect that content together. That said, on the engagement interactivity side of things, the content isn't necessarily all fully engaging. Lots of the content in there is kind of pre-programmed content, where there's 3D models of different animals or dinosaurs or things like that moving around you, but you're not necessarily interacting with it. There definitely are interactive pieces, especially with something like their science courses and things along those lines, but it is more on kind of the pre-programmed side of things. So I would say here, looking at what we have in the other areas, I would score it around above the Spatial side of things, but still below the Remio Rec Room. So we had Spatial at the 6.9 and Remio and Rec Room at the 9.6 and 9.2 respectively. So I would say like a nice 8.1 because of the content they offer, but not fully interactive as some other content may be. Then moving on to the number of people's category, again, similar to other platforms here, they have a limit of 50 people in an environment. I think for the use case, that's a good amount of people. You're normally not going to have a class of above 50 people unless you're doing a very large lecture. And even then, there is the ability to, like I said, pre-program content, have people come in asynchronously to enjoy that content and rewatch that content. So I would say here it would be definitely above the rec room with 16 people and probably right around the spatial because of the pre-programming content and how that works in the async side of things. I would say maybe a 7.6, so just above what Spatial is able to offer there. Then moving to the accessibility side of things, I think just going to rate it at a 7 again, similar to other platforms like Rec Room and Spatial that we've rated. It's not a platform that has all kinds of accessibility features like we have built into some of our EDI simulations and things along those lines, or that Remio is working on. But they do have kind of the standard features that you would look for accessibility. So definitely they could do a lot more work there, but they're kind of on the average that most platforms that are on. So I'll rate it at a 7 there. Going to the customizability and building tools, definitely above Remio and Spatial here. Also definitely below Rec Room. I would say a strong 8 for Engage here. And to touch on that a little bit more, like I said, you can pre-program lesson plans. So that means you can go into a space and decide at what time points you want different animations to happen so that different animals or dinosaurs or other 3D models are moving around in the 3D space. And you can even record a full lecture of yourself as your 3D avatar and then have that be able to be played back asynchronously so that people that weren't able to join the class are able to come in and still enjoy the full class just like it would have been if they were there live time. So that's why I would rate it at an 8. Then moving down to the community side of things, I think they have a really strong community. I would probably put it at kind of the 8.5 that I put Spatial at there, where it's really a community of educators and they have a strong in-house community to support those educators. So I think that the 8.5 is a nice place where there's lots of people sharing their results of using Engage, how they're using Engage, sharing their lesson plans and environments that they've created and things along those lines. So a nice strong community there at Engage. Lastly, educational score. I think that it's definitely above all of the others that are on here because of its use case and how it's being built for educators, having all kind of the host controls so that you can mute people when needed and just have like full control over your teaching environment, as well as have those asynchronous functionalities that I was talking about. So I'd put it at, I think, an 8.7. There's definitely still a lot of improvement that I could see there. Overall, looking at the educational score, going back to kind of adding more accessibility, adding the ability for more people to join the room, kind of just upping all of the other categories that we talked about here would add more of an educational use cases and add to the educational score here. But overall, a really high score for Engage here. And now I'll pass it back to Marvin to talk about Meta Horizon Worlds as well as Meta Horizon Workrooms, which bundle those into one.
Yeah. So just keeping it focused onto Horizon Workrooms, like Evan just stated, you guys might be a little bit more accustomed to Horizon Worlds, but Horizon Workrooms is an immersive virtual office where you can meet teammates, brainstorm ideas, share presentations, and just get things done in a collaborative space. And yeah, just going through the grading criteria here. In terms of software, Horizon Workrooms is partnered with Zoom, which is huge. That unfortunately, that is their only integration from what I read up on the sites and everything. But it's still a major partner to have. In terms of hardware, they are available on PC, but unfortunately, because it is Meta, They aren't available on any other headsets outside of the Quest, Quest 2, and Quest Pro. So in terms of a score, I'd probably rate this a 6, I would say. It's a fair score. And in terms of ease of use, I'd probably give this a solid 6.9, just under that 7, just because from experience in actually using Horizon Workrooms, there were a bunch of like steps to actually get everything set up. You would have to download the app, and then after that, go onto your computer to make an account outside of making accounts on the VR headset. So I can see that being sort of like a difficult process for a lot of people. So I would say, yeah, 6.9 for ease of use. And in terms of
just add there, I think the score is fair, but the one nice part about Horizon Workrooms is that you can join from your computer, and that is just a link. So there's no like really setup you need to do there. So on that side, it is a little bit easier, but talking strictly on the VR side of things, it is a little more complicated to get set up. So I think the 6.9 score is fair.
Right, for sure. And just moving on to in terms of engagement, interactivity, and variety of content, I wouldn't say there's too much variety of content on Horizon Workrooms. Horizon Worlds is a completely different subject, but in terms of Horizon Workrooms, it is just an office space that you can just collaborate with a team. So I would give their variety of content there probably a 4.2. 4.2. Just because the only variety of content would be just the content that you're uploading directly from your computer and sharing with your team members. Yeah, so in terms of number of people, I would probably rate it as 7.5, just because they do only allow up to 50 maximum people. But what's really cool about Horizon Worlds is on the VR side of things, there is a maximum of only 16 people. Well, on top of that, you can add an extra 34 people to join via Zoom. So 7.5. So in terms of accessibility, I would probably rate it a 7.8, a little bit higher than average, just because Meta is working on integrating a little bit more accessibility features into their Oculus headsets. So Horizon Workrooms will work with all those features that they're working on. So in terms of customizability and building tools, I would probably give it around a 6.1, just because there's not too many things that you can really customize within the space. There are a few things that you can customize with the space in terms of adding your own logos and changing the layout of the room. But outside of that, not too many things you can really customize. So 6.1. So now in terms of community, I would say that there really isn't a community in terms of Horizon Workrooms. But for the most part, it is just with the use cases, and the people using Workrooms are working professionals. So I'd probably give it a 3, simply just like I said, like there really isn't too much of a community there. So yeah. And in terms of educational score, I would probably rate Horizon Workrooms around a 7.6, 7.7, just because I do see how Horizon Workrooms can be used in a classroom, and outside of just like the traditional Zoom calls, it is that extra element of VR that can get students a little bit more engaged and can pay more attention to the actual lesson plan. So I think a 7.6 is a fair score there.
Perfect. Yeah, I would agree with all those scores. I think Horizon Workrooms has a very set use case for it, so it's not necessarily built for everything here, but there are a lot of use cases for it in the educational space. So I think a 7.6 is a nice average space just for using it for those kind of like lectures or seminar meetings, and yeah, could just really see it improving in the accessibility space as Oculus or Meta releases these new updates for accessibility.
Okay.
So moving on to the last one here, and again, I'll just kind of go through everything, but I know you're a little more familiar with VRchat than Spatial and Engage, Marvin, so feel free to jump into that anytime if you have some comments here. But VRchat, basically it's a social VR platform. It's been around for since the beginning of VR time. It's kind of being a meme. It's being used for classes. It's being used for all kinds of different things. So it's a great platform that's being built out over many years for all kinds of different use cases. But let's go through it. Basically, integrations with other software and hardware. It doesn't necessarily integrate with a lot of other hardwares and software, lots of other softwares, but it does work on all kinds of different hardware. So pretty high score in that regard, as well as it allows you to bring in your own 3D models and own characters and avatars. So being able to customize at that level and bring in that kind of integration, I think brings the score up, where I would still put it below Remio because you're not directly integrating with other VR applications. But it does work with a lot. So I think to bring it above our second place there of Spatial, I would put it at a 8.8 for VRchat, where you're able to integrate a lot and build your own custom worlds with Unity and things like that, and then bring them into VRchat, which adds a lot of back-end integrations. Then going on to ease of use, controls, lag, joining, customer support. I would say the customer support here is pretty low. There is a lot of forums and things that you can go to, but there isn't direct contact with a ton of people there at VRchat. That said, it is pretty easy to join in. We have hosted classes in VRchat before, and there's been like a couple issues just like getting everyone connected into the space for the first time. But after the first class, everyone was kind of able to jump in and join by themselves. So it shows that it's pretty easy for students and for professors to pick up quickly and understand how to use the controls. And we were taking students from their classroom into worlds where they could pick out their own custom avatars and things along those lines. So I would say here, ease of use is kind of maybe a little bit below the rec room area. I put it on par maybe with Engage, so just have an 8 rating there. Then we have engagement, interactivity, and variety of content. And so for this, I would say there's such a huge variety of content, all kinds of user-generated content. And like I said, can integrate with Unity and things like that. So allows for a large variety there. And so much interactivity where you're able to play different games, change up all kinds of avatars, whether you want to look like a regular human or look like a jalapeno or a banana walking around. There's so much variety and interactivity, and you're able to high-five people and do all kinds of things with other avatars on the platform. So I would say it has a pretty high rating. It's not necessarily the highest of like Rec Room and in that kind of sense of interactivity, or like the Remio side of things that we have, but I would put it right in there. So let's say a 9.1, scoring in our top 3 there. Moving on to number of people, VRchat sets the bar a little bit higher than some of the other platforms here, allowing for up to 80 people in a space. So I would score it higher than others, but not as high as Remio having 800 people. So let's just put it at a strong 8, above the rest, but below Remio. Moving on to accessibility, VRchat is very much taking into consideration the feedback from their community and building in all kinds of different accessibility features. One that is kind of a little bit newer and kind of an interesting one is for players to be able to play while lying down. This is especially for players that are bedridden, can't get up and move around. So building in that kind of accessibility functionality, I think kind of sets a good bar here, where I would say an 8.6, just above what Remio is offering, and being able to add in those features. And just sounds like they're working on adding those features. So I'm sure over the coming years that will go up to a 9 or a 10 as they add kind of all the accessibility features that people could be looking for. Then we have the customizability of building tools. I would put this one at a 10, right above Rec Room, just because they allow for you to build full worlds within Unity. And now this isn't going to be necessarily the best for some people, because you don't know how to use Unity like myself and like Marvin, but it allows for you to work with people that do know Unity and make really amazing worlds and really build those out. Then we have the community side of things. So community, I would say it has a very strong community, probably the best community in the VR world. I would rate the community of VRchat at kind of a 9. The reason I wouldn't put it at a full 10 is because the community can sometimes be a little bit toxic when you're going in and meeting people. It's not necessarily always the best community to go into, especially if you're using it for an educational sense. But overall, people build their own worlds and find their own niches where they're able to find their personal community. So it's definitely very high up there and the highest in this group, I would say. And then lastly, we have the educational score. Like I said, we've used VRchat for classes in the past at Brock University and assisting other colleges and universities setting up their VR labs and VR spaces for educational use cases. So it's definitely being used in this sense. It's not necessarily made for it, but because it allows you to integrate with Unity, you can build your own worlds and then you can explore other worlds. Similarly to Remio, you're able to go through portals and go into all kinds of different experiences. So I would say the educational score is quite high, maybe not, I would put it between Remio and Engage, but maybe a little bit closer to Remio. So I'm going to say like an 8.3. It has a lot of use cases there if you know how to use them correctly. That's not going to say that they're always going to be used correctly, but puts it in a really high score there for VRchat. So as we're wrapping up here, I see that Marvin put together kind of the average score for each of these. So Marvin, if you just kind of want to go through and averaging out these scores, what is each platform kind of rated at after we went through each category here?
Yeah, of course. So scored out of 10 expert stars, Remio comes in at 7.4. Workrooms comes in at 7.6. Spatial comes in at 7.5. Engage comes in at 7.9. Meta Horizon comes in at 6.1. And VRchat comes in with the highest score at 8.7 expert stars.
Amazing. Well, the expert star rating is definitely the way to rate anything VR related. I will note, though, that even though VRchat scored the highest here, each of these we were going through the different reasons for these scoring. So depending on your use case, it's really going to vary. You're not going to always want to use VRchat just because we gave it the highest score here. So it's really depends on your use case. And if you listen through the full podcast here, you have heard all kind of the reasoning that we have for why we hit these scores, and should give you a good idea of why you would use each of these platforms in your different use cases. But if you have more questions, if you're curious as to giving more explanation of why we set these scores, or just curious of what platform might be great for your use case, feel free to reach out or comment below so that we can answer your questions and make sure that you're set up with the right platform for your use case. So I guess with that, Marvin, any final statements or comments that you'd like to make after going through our expert star rating for the first time for these 6 platforms?
Yeah, no, obviously these are all great. Like Evan said, these are all great VR platforms that we all have experience in. And yeah, definitely go try, test them out yourselves, and let us know in the comments below what you would rate them based on our expert star criteria.
Awesome. Well, yeah, if you made it all the way to the end here, thank you for tuning in and listening through. It was great chatting with you, Marvin. Thank you for coming on to chat about all these different platforms. And yeah, I'm excited to see what platforms people are using. And please comment below. There's lots of platforms out there, probably thousands of them at this point. So we just kind of went off of our top 6, but comment below some of your other favorites, and maybe we'll have to go test them out and do another expert star rating for platforms. Or if there's something else that you'd like us to go through and rate, comment that as well. Otherwise, we'll see you on the next one. Thank you.
Bye, guys.